This month in the studio felt a little unpredictable. I also happened to be starting off the year with my biggest month yet. I was preparing to run my first ever art workshops, experimenting with a new way to transfer my drawings onto canvas, and starting an entirely new series that actually started with a piece from my solo show Soft Moments that quite literally melted off the gallery wall. Somehow, in the middle of all of that, one of my paintings ended up winning first prize at a local art competition. So I thought I would bring you along for the month and show you what all of that actually looked like. For Christmas, I received my first ever projector, which honestly felt like a huge upgrade for my studio, and for some weird reason made me feel more like a professional working artist who knew what they were doing. Over the last year and a half, I tried all sorts of methods for transferring drawings onto canvas. Gridding, graphite transfer paper, and at one point I was even printing giant paper posters and using oil paint to transfer the image onto the canvas, which was incredibly messy and not the most sustainable or affordable process. The projector was definitely made things easier, though it hasn't been without a few teething issues. The biggest challenge was balancing it so the image wouldn't project crooked. Eventually I ended up using my painting pole to counterbalance the weight of the projector, which actually works surprisingly well. Even then, I still had to split my sketch into two projections and then carefully line up the top half with the top half with the bottom. And then, because I can't see graphite very well, I had to trace everything using a black marker instead of pencil. This was one of my main concerns and why I put off getting a projector for so long, is with my vision loss. I was worried I wouldn't actually be able to see the projection clearly enough, but it's actually been a way easier process. This month I also ran my first ever art workshops. It was a part of my solo show Soft Moments that the gallery supported me to make accessible for me to teach. For me, that looked like, rather than running the workshops from in the actual Tanks gallery, we hired the visitor center just up from the Tanks, which had air conditioning, as well as splitting the workshops over 2 weekends so that they were shorter sessions, and I was able to maintain a higher energy level and really engage with those participating, which felt both exciting and slightly terrifying. Teaching painting is very different from doing it alone in the studio. Suddenly you have to translate what you've spent years learning to make instinct into something you can actually explain, and not even explain, but explain well enough that other people can follow and take on board themselves in action. I spent a lot of time preparing, not just gathering materials, but thinking carefully about how I approach painting. I wanted the workshops to feel like a safe place for people to experiment without overthinking. I worked on creating examples ahead of time so that they could see both options of what we were painting, because the participants got to choose between painting a sea turtle or painting floral. I was actually surprised by how many people loved the flowers. I really thought the sea turtles would be the more popular option, but the flowers won out on the actual day by a lot. Of course, things didn't go entirely to plan. We actually discovered a ticketing error the week of the workshops. There were 20 tickets available for what was meant to be a 12-person event. 16 had already been sold, and I had to turn away 4 more people who tried to book after it sold out. At the same time, a cyclone warning had just been issued. Living at the tip of Australia means a lot of art supplies are hard to access locally, and the specific inks I use in the workshops aren't available anywhere nearby. So my mum and I were driving around in absolute bucketing sheet rain that we could hardly see through around town, trying to find extra supplies and artboards before the real arrived. Just as we made it home safely, the workshops were officially postponed. The gallery had decided to close for the weekend because the cyclone had been upgraded to a Category 2 warning. So emails were sent out to everyone participating, letting them know we would begin the following Saturday instead. And then the cyclone never actually came to Cairns. Instead, we had a weekend of sunshine and light showers. The poor gallery staff had taken everything down of my solo show as well as the other artists and photographer that was currently being shown in the gallery, as it is open air, and then they had to put everyone's artwork back up all over again afterwards, which is just the joys of living in far north Queensland. It's better to be prepared than get caught in the crosshairs of a cyclone. In the meantime, the new year also meant starting new paintings, although sometimes those new works begin with older ideas that are still evolving. In 2025, I was lucky enough to be accepted into the Flame Visual Arts program for a second year. Flame is a 3-month mentorship program where young artists work with local mentors before presenting in a group exhibition. For this program, I wanted to continue exploring an idea that actually started with a painting for my first solo exhibition. This painting was called Castlereagh Crossing Connections, from my solo show Soft Moments that was actually still exhibiting at the time. It explored sign language within a natural landscape, and it was one of my favorite pieces from the exhibition. Unfortunately, it had to be removed after only a few days. The humidity in the air somehow ate through 4 layers of sealant and reactivated some watercolor powder I was experimenting with. The green pigment literally started melting down the wall. Thankfully, I had scanned the work beforehand, so prints of the original piece were still available. But despite the disaster, the idea behind the painting stayed with me. I realized how much I loved painting sign language within landscapes, and I wanted to push that idea further. So I decided to continue the series for the Flame program. A huge part of the program is experimenting, whether it's trying a new style or trying a new process, just really stretching yourself as an artist. I wanted to try a process that I had experimented with a little bit the previous year. I discovered Roselli through Andrew Tischler's portrait course, and it was an absolute game changer for my narrative portraits. I was able to get so much more depth and so much more likeness and realism into my portraits just looking at the painting I did before learning the technique versus the first painting I did with that technique, which was not some fragile dough. It was like a night and day difference. And I've always been curious about what that would look like on a larger scale. I know a lot of the old masters used to use it, but I've seen a lot of mixed information that it can kind of grey out or sort of make your paintings have a sickle undertone. Since my paintings are very much known for their colour, I was a bit concerned about how it would look in the final product. But I kind of took a bit of a leap, considering this painting is 170 centimeters by 130 centimeters wide, so it's 1.7 meters high. It was going to take me a while to do, so if this technique didn't work, I was going to be in big trouble. So it was a huge leap of faith. But I originally decided to use acrylic paint to do the underlayer because of the size of the painting. Oil paint is not a cheap medium to use, so I wanted to try and save on it as much as I could. I was using Van Dyke Brown, but I ended up mixing it with blue because the Van Dyke Brown still wasn't stark enough value with my vision loss for me to be able to see. So I sort of switched back to a weird brown-black color because acrylic paint oxidizes and changes colors as it dries. It's my biggest frustration and a huge reason why I switched over from acrylic to oil, which is ultimately what I did very quickly. Within a few breaks, I had a lot of having to lie down breaks because of my heart during this month, but after that point I was so fed up, I switched over to oil paint, and every bit of that painting that previously had acrylic paint was very quickly covered up with oil. For the program this year, we were actually given a theme, which was past, present, future, and it was to celebrate 150 years of Cairns. I knew that I wanted to do something with the local landscapes and signing, but I didn't know what until I saw this image from a local photographer of two girls posed on a rock. Now the posing was different, the girls were holding hands, but I could just picture this image in my head, so I messaged asking for permission if I could use the image in a reference for a larger painting that I would make my own. And with permission, I absolutely jumped on it. I adjusted and photoshopped the image to change the posing. I added my own arms for the sign for growth. I changed the background completely to make it more of my own voice, my own normal style. But the overall theme about the painting became about what nature teaches us about growth and the different types of growth: regrowth, new growth, growth after like a fire or a storm, because Cairns especially has gone through a lot recently in the wet seasons with the cyclones and the damages, mudslides and all sorts of things. So I just fell in love with this concept of nature being our biggest teacher, and the biggest teacher for, but not only that, but also growing at your own pace. I think the biggest thing I struggled with, especially as I've kind of gone from my late teens to my early 20s, and I live in a body that forces me to slow down, to not be able to do things most of my age are able to do. And it's a real struggle, especially in the age of social media, where it's so in your face to see what everyone's achieving, buying houses, settling down, doing amazing things in their career. And it's really easy to feel so behind everyone else and sort of spiral. So that was sort of the unintentional theme that simply started because I saw an image and I could just see a story form in my head. So that was what I was trying to create and for the program, but I really wanted to lean more into realism to see how far I could push my eyes, thus the giant canvas that I have a very short deadline to paint. And there's so much detail and nuance in all of these ripples in the reflect. Growth also felt like a really appropriate theme for the painting to sort of encapsulate my experience and time in the flame programs from the first year versus now my second year. Because my first year I was scared of my own shadow. I was embarrassed to talk about my art, to show it to anyone. I had so much imposter syndrome, and I was like a little kid in a lolly shop and had stars in my eyes for the mentors and was just soaking up every crumb that they were willing to share. And it wasn't that I didn't go in with the same enthusiasm this year. I just had more confidence in myself as an artist. I still get a bit embarrassed to show my art. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm showing off or out myself, but I love creating and I love sharing the stories behind the paintings that I make, because I feel like the stories behind them are important or meaningful or could benefit the person that I'm sharing with in some way. But it's been a huge learning curve through the program. Has taught me what to expect when I then created my solo show at the end of last year. And then going into this year, it wasn't so scary. It was still daunting because I wanted to stretch myself and I wanted to try new things. But I had all these new opportunities that had happened between the last program and this program, because I had gained so much confidence to put myself out there as an artist. I had entered local competitions and actually won one. Like, there was so many small steps that I had taken between that time. I was in the midst of running my own workshops, and I actually missed one of the mentors workshops in the program that I was so excited about. I wasn't able to go because it was the same day as my own workshop, which was just insane to me to be preparing for my own workshop. Instead, I definitely did not feel qualified to be teaching or showing anyone anything. But if I learned anything from the last year is that putting myself outside of my comfort zone was how I grew the most as an artist. So I was kind of just putting my foot forward and hoping for the best. So it's Friday. I have my first workshop tomorrow. It's a 2-part workshop. It was supposed to be last week. We had what was supposed to be a tropical low that then was predicted to be like a category 2. Oh god, I'm really bad at cycling still after 7 years living in Cairns. I can't remember how they work it with the warnings, but regardless, my workshop got postponed. The entire gallery got shut down and packed up because it's not an inside gallery, like it's a tank, but the doors and gates are open, like they're just a few metal bars. So it doesn't prevent the weather from coming into the gallery, so they had to take everything down, and then nothing happened. I mean, it did down in ALA, but not in Cairns. So everything got shut down for nothing, but regardless, now we're back into the swing of things. Tomorrow is mixed media, and the following Saturday is the oil paint. I'm freaking out. I thought I'd get maybe 3 people. We're actually overbooked. We have 15. It was meant to only be 12. At one stage it was 16, and then the day change kind of helped me out. We're back to 15 people, but my room is an absolute state of despair because not only am I prepping for the workshop, but I am also in a group show, and I have like 3-4 weeks to finish this ginormous painting. So I've been sitting on the floor working on that painting too, whilst prepping a bajillion boards with gesso and molding paste, putting individual ink into bottles, getting spray bottles filled with water, putting all of them into boxes so that we can take them in the car tomorrow into the visitor centre. But oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I've never done anything like this before, so wish me luck. Hopefully everything from now, I don't even want to say that I'm too scared about saying anything that it's gonna like curse me that they'll go wrong, so I'm not gonna say anything. We'll see you after the workshop. In the end, the postponement actually helped. It gave me a little bit more time to mentally prepare. I'm still shaking like a leaf to start off with, but despite a few technical issues at the start, we did end up starting a little bit late because of computer issues. We only had 30 minutes to set up from when opening is before people were meant to arrive and start, which in theory sounds fine, but it really isn't enough time to set up for a workshop, and I cannot take credit for getting it set up because it was thanks to help of my mom and my interpreter, as well as my other interpreter who was there as a participant but was kind enough to help with handing things out. Getting everything set up for 15 people in a very short amount of time is not a quick process, but it was really special getting to see how much everyone loved the grayscale process, and amazing watching their paintings slowly come together. I was so nervous demoing the process. We were doing a mixed media technique, which was pretty much the base of all of my paintings from my solo exhibition, so the purpose for the workshop was to share my process behind the paintings people were seeing in the solo show. But it's very different to be painting behind closed doors in my own space where the only person watching me is a camera, and being able to curate what people see versus, deleting when accidents happen or when they get stuck or make the wrong brush mark. This was happening live, and not only did I have a group of people watching me, I had to explain what I was doing and why, and answer questions that were being interpreted to me. I couldn't just answer as I'm talking, as I was painting, because I can't hear what the questions are, so it's having to balance between what I'm doing and making sure I'm looking at my interpreter and seeing if anyone's asking any questions. It is just a whole other ballgame, but it was really empowering to see people enjoying the techniques, and I enjoyed teaching workshops way more than I expected to for someone who gets quite anxious being the center of attention or being sort of the one in charge. After the first workshop, I completely lost my voice for 2 days. So the next session, we decided to film my main explanation ahead of time. That way I could focus on demonstrating techniques and moving around the room, checking in with everyone individually. I had no idea at the time how much that decision would end up helping. On the day of the second workshop, I woke up having one of my worst symptom days. I don't have them every day, but a few days each month I cannot function whatsoever. And it just happened to land on one of the days I had to function, of course. Always the way with chronic illness. But we had already postponed once and I didn't want to cancel again. So after setting everything up, I started having issues with my heart rate. Thankfully, the video explanation was playing. I was sitting, hiding away in the back of the room with my legs elevated and ice packs. And I was staring at the door trying to figure out if I could quietly disappear to the bathroom, pass out, and then come back to teach because it was borderlining on I'm going to recover quicker if I just lose consciousness, which this entire mental conversation, it sounds ridiculous unless you have POTS, and then it is, completely normal, unfortunately. Thankfully, things settled down before the video finished and I was able to run the demonstration normally. I still have no idea if anyone noticed, but afterwards I worried a lot about whether I had been professional enough or if it had affected their experience. Because honestly, I ended up loving teaching and I would really like to continue running workshops in the future. At the end of the month, one of my paintings was also a part of the local art society showcase at Cannes Gallery. This was my second year exhibiting there and it still feels surreal seeing my work in that space as, alongside Tanks, as one of the most renowned art galleries in our area. Unfortunately, I wasn't actually there when the awards were announced. Large, crowded environments are something I struggle with physically. Last year I attended the opening in a wheelchair and the space became too difficult to navigate as it filled with people I was just getting elbowed and bumped into constantly and I couldn't actually see any of the art or move around the space. This year I decided to walk as a huge part of my physio has been trying to stand to paint to build up my tolerance for how long I can stand and walk out in public. We had only planned to stay for a short time, but I wanted to stay long enough for announcements, but we had asked going in if people would let us know who won because it can change very quickly with my body. 1 minute I can be fine and the next minute I need to leave. Unfortunately, the more crowded it became, it was just a repeat of last year. The more I was getting bumped into, which isn't ideal when you have the balance of a newborn foal. And I kept going sprawling. We stayed until 6:30 and the announcement still hadn't been made. We'd been there for about 40 minutes. So we left as it was also the same night as a flame meeting for the program. And I'd from the beginning intended to attend both for half the time. 10 minutes later, just as we'd arrived across town to Tanks for the meeting, I got a message saying that my painting had won Best Oil Painting. I was in shock. I was really sad to have missed it, but it meant so much to receive that recognition, especially for a piece that represents different communication styles and struggles like my own. A huge reason why I paint is so that young people with illness and disability can grow up seeing themselves. Whilst the original of Everyone Has a Seat at the Table is a part of my private collection, I do have paper and canvas prints available on my website. If this painting resonated with you or you know someone who it might, please consider sharing with them. I'll have the link to my website in the description box below. And if you enjoy seeing the stories behind my paintings, behind the scenes in the studio, please consider subscribing. I document the full journey behind work as an emerging artist here. Thanks for watching.